In part 5 of our recap of the God of War franchise, we spoke of the events shown in God of War 2, about the beginning of the conflicts between Kratos and Zeus, and left off with Kratos bearing down on Mount Olympus with an army of Titans by his side. In the 6th and final part of this series, we're going to talk about God of War 3, the last game in the chronology, and how Kratos' fight against the gods plays out. Cliffhanger endings are never guaranteed to be a success, and very few stories can get them right. God of War 2 was a prime example of a cliffhanger ending done right, and its successor, God of War 3, turned out to be an excellent payoff as well. The climax of God of War 2 sees Kratos and his Titan companions climbing up the side of Mount Olympus in the build-up to an epic clash between cosmic forces, and God of War 3 picks up exactly where its predecessor left off. Kratos proclaims to Zeus that his son has returned, and that he brings with him the destruction of the Greek pantheon of gods. And as such, the opening of the game drops players right into the middle of a raging battle between gods and titans, with Kratos still on Gaia's back. The deadliest weapon the Olympians have, at least for now, is Poseidon, the god of the seas. Poseidon transforms himself into a massive sea warhorse creature, dealing repeatedly deadly blows to the titans, and it falls to Kratos to put a stop to the Olympians' counterattack. Poseidon serves as the opening boss fight of God of War 3, and one of the best boss fights in the entire series, period. With the help of Gaia, Kratos manages to strike some deadly blows against Poseidon, knocking him out of his godly form, and then engages him in battle once again. The duel lasts for some time, but it ends quite brutally, with Kratos literally gouging Poseidon's eyes out, then snapping his neck to kill him, and then throwing his lifeless body into the sea below. Poseidon, though, was a god, the one who controls the seas and everything in them, and as such, his death is bound to have some major consequences. As his corpse hits the water, the seas explode, with their levels and those of the oceans suddenly rising significantly. All of Greece, and possibly the rest of the world, is completely drowned, with only a few select places in high altitude, such as Mount Olympus, remaining over water. But Kratos cares very little for trivialities such as the flooding of the world or the death of a god. He's hellbent on one thing and one thing alone, completing his vengeance by killing his father, Zeus. Everything else that comes in his way is just another hurdle to jump over. Kratos and Gaia continue their climb of Olympus, and soon they reach the summit, where Zeus awaits in his pavilion. With the blade of Olympus in his hand, Kratos rushes towards his father, but things don't exactly go the way he thought they would. Zeus lets loose a large bolt of lightning and strikes Gaia with it, completely severing one of her arms and then sending her, with Kratos still on her, tumbling downward. She manages to grab hold of the mountainside as she falls, while Kratos hangs off of her. But with only one hand left, she realizes she may not have what it takes to save both herself and Kratos. Gaia tells the Spartan that he was nothing but a pawn in the Titans' grand plans, and that now he has led them to Zeus, where they can finally have their own vengeance. They no longer have any need of him, and so she betrays him, letting him off. Kratos falls to his death once again and finds himself floating in the river Styx in the underworld. But if there's one thing we've learned about the ghost of Sparta, it's that he just doesn't know how to die or how to give up. Having once again lost all of the powers he acquired as the god of war, Kratos stumbles out of the Styx and onto solid land, and there he meets Athena. She is, of course, still dead, having been stabbed by Kratos at the end of the previous game, but she tells him that now she lives in a higher plane of existence, which is reflected in her ghostly and ethereal form. As it turns out, Athena is now willing to help Kratos on his quest for revenge against Zeus. That's strange, for sure, considering how when we last saw her, she was so intent on stopping Kratos from killing Zeus that she ended up sacrificing herself. And while the game itself doesn't go into how or why that happened, in a while we will spend some time on speculating why that change must have occurred. For now, let's get back to the story. Athena tells Kratos that there is a way for him to kill Zeus, and it is one that Kratos is all too familiar with: opening Pandora's box. Pandora's box, as you might remember, contains incredible powers inside of it, and it was with the help of these powers that Kratos was able to kill Ares and take his place as the new god of war. Athena tells him that if he can open Pandora's box yet again, he might be able to use its powers to kill the king of Olympus. Unlike the last time though, the box isn't in Pandora's temple on top of the titan Kronos' back. Instead, it now resides in Olympus and is covered in ever-burning fires, which are known as the Flame of Olympus. The only way to get to the box is, of course, through the flame, and the key to extinguishing the flame is actually a child, the girl Pandora. Before we continue, let's briefly talk a little bit about Pandora and a relation with the box, because this information is going to be important as the story progresses. Pandora's box was created by the smith god Hephaestus after the Great War between the Titans and the Olympians at Zeus's command, with the intention being to lock away great evils and terrifying powers inside of it after the end of the battles. However, when Kratos opened the box and killed Ares, Zeus realized that keeping it locked is going to be easier said than done, and as such, commanded Hephaestus to build a key for it. He did just that, and the key went on to take on a life of its own, turning into the child Pandora, who Hephaestus looked at as his daughter. How is she the key to all of this, though? Well, while anyone else who touches the flame of Olympus would only be burned alive, if Pandora were to walk into it, she would not only die, but it would also extinguish the flame, leaving the box unguarded. Kratos' objective now is to find Pandora, who was kidnapped by Zeus after he moved the box. And where is Pandora exactly? She waits for Kratos in the labyrinth, a labyrinthine prison true to its name, which was constructed at Zeus's orders by the architect Daedalus, who also happens to be the father of Icarus. Remember Icarus? Kratos killed him, ripped his wings off, and then kept them for himself. Yeah, that guy. Anyway, the labyrinth is also where Kratos is headed next, but before he can get to it, he faces many obstacles. The character of Kratos is known for his propensity to kill any and all gods he comes across, and in God of War 3, he takes that one step further. The bulk of the game sees Kratos trying to get to the labyrinth in order to rescue Pandora, but as he does so, he encounters and bests a number of gods and demigods, and each of these actions, as it turns out, has a major, far-reaching consequence. After having already killed Poseidon, the next Olympian Kratos runs into is Hades, the lord of the underworld himself, who has his own scores to settle with the ghost of Sparta, the man who killed his wife Persephone back during the events of Chains of Olympus. The boss fight against Hades is another excellent one, and it ends as Kratos uses Hades' own weapons to tear out his soul from his body and kill him. But Hades proves to be just one among many casualties in Kratos' quest for revenge. He also fights Helios, the sun god, who he fought so hard to rescue from the Titan Atlas so many years ago. The fight, as you can imagine, doesn't end well for the Olympian, and Kratos ends up not only killing him, but literally tearing his head off with his own hands so that he could later use the powers of the sun through it. Hermes, the god of speed, also falls before the fallen god of war. He mocks Kratos for his lack of speed, gloating before him and reveling in his agility, but his cockiness is shattered when Kratos ends up killing him. He hacks his leg off and then takes his boots, which allows him to run incredibly fast and even along walls, all of which proves to be incredibly useful in certain gameplay sections as the game progresses. Kratos later also encounters Hercules, his half-brother. Hercules, it is revealed, harbors a burning resentment for Kratos and all of the recognition that he has received. He feels that, as a greater warrior and true-born son of Zeus, he is far more deserving of the title of God of War. His hopes, however, are dashed when Kratos crushes him under a balcony and then bashes his face in. Kratos also runs into Hera, the queen of Olympus and the wife of Zeus, and though there is no actual fight between the two of them, meaning that she's one of the few Olympians in the entire game that also doesn't function as a boss, Kratos does end up killing her by snapping her neck. When Hera dies, so too does all of the plant life. So deeply does Kratos become obsessed with his need for vengeance that he destroys nearly everything that holds the world together, plunging it into darkness and ruin with not a single care about the consequences of his actions. When Kratos kills Poseidon, the seas rage and the world is drowned and flooded. When Hades dies, the Olympians' control over the underworld breaks, releasing the souls of the dead and dying into the world of the living. When Helios is killed, the sun disappears. When Kratos kills Hermes, a plague of disease-bearing flies is released unto the world. When he snaps Hera's neck, all of the plant life on Earth dies along with the goddess. The Olympians are, of course, gods, and they each in their own way are responsible for all life and creation. They hold the world together, and as Kratos kills them one by one, the world follows suit, crumbling and falling bit by bit. But that's not even all. Hephaestus also dies at Kratos' hands after he tries to lead him into a trap. And that, of course, brings us to the big one. We're speaking, of course, about Kronos. Even if you've never played God of War 3, chances are you've heard of the legendary Kronos boss fight, which is undoubtedly the best fight in not just this particular game, but in the entire series. After Kratos manages to best Pandora's temple and use the box to kill Ares back during the original God of War, a furious Zeus ended up banishing his defeated and exiled father to the pits of Tartarus. When Kratos ends up in the pits during God of War 3, he ends up killing the Titan by pulling off his fingernail, then impaling his jaw with a spike, tearing him open from the inside, and then finally stabbing him with the blade of Olympus. Finally, after all of these trials and battles, Kratos is able to reach the labyrinth. And after he passes through a number of challenges within, he finds the girl. The next section of the game sees Kratos escorting her out of the labyrinth while fighting through hordes of monsters, avoiding traps and deadly machinations and everything in between. And while some people might only look at it as an annoying escort mission, which it can be at times, it serves as a much greater purpose from the narrative point of view. Kratos immediately develops a liking for the girl, almost looking at her as a sort of surrogate Calliope, the daughter he had lost over 10 years ago to his own rage and bloodlust. He protects her fiercely as they attempt to make it out of the labyrinth, and when they finally do arrive at the flame of Olympus, Kratos realizes that he is unwilling to let her die. Pandora, however, is adamant that Kratos let her do as she wishes. To extinguish the flame of Olympus, as she tells him, is her purpose, and though it may result in her death, she wants nothing more than to fulfill her purpose. Kratos tries to stop her at first, but she breaks free and runs toward the flame. She is stopped in her tracks as Zeus himself enters the scene, standing between her and the flame of Olympus, and thus the climax of God of War 3 and the series' Greek saga kicks off. Zeus openly mocks Kratos, deriding him for being foolish enough to look at Pandora and care about her like his daughter, for projecting the guilt he's always carried about Calliope's death onto the situation at hand. The two of them clash together, engaging in a bloody and intense fight. But even as father and son remain intent upon beating each other to a pulp, in the background, Pandora rushes toward the flame of Olympus. Kratos breaks away from his fight with Zeus and runs toward Pandora, grabbing her hand to prevent her destined death. The girl pleads to let her go, so that she can fulfill the purpose for which she was made, while Zeus tells Kratos to do the opposite, telling him that if he lets Pandora die, he will have failed her just as he failed his own daughter all of those years ago. This, however, doesn't have the kind of effect on Kratos Zeus may have been hoping for. Rather than guilting him into pulling Pandora away from the blue fires that guard the box, he provokes a burning rage within the ghost of Sparta. He then lets Pandora go, and the child flies into the flame of Olympus. Her death seals her fate, as the flames extinguish, leaving Pandora's box completely unguarded. When Kratos opens the box, though, he finds something he didn't expect. He finds nothing. Absolutely nothing. Zilch. As Kratos opens the box and stares down into it, he sees that it is completely empty, devoid of any of the powers he had expected to find inside. Upon seeing this, Zeus mocks his son once again, ridiculing him for, in his own words, yet another failure. With this, he teleports outside, but Kratos has come too far to turn back now. With or without the powers within the Pandora's box, he is more determined than ever to complete his quest for vengeance. The ghost of Sparta will not rest until Zeus is dead, and so he follows him outside. Kratos finds himself in the pavilion on top of Mount Olympus once again, and once more, the King of Olympus and the Ghost of Sparta go head-to-head in combat. Their fight, however, is cut short. Gaia arrives on the scene, and she sees the perfect opportunity to deal with two of her greatest enemies, and takes it. She tries to kill them both, triggering a spectacular three-way battle between them. In the middle of the battle, Kratos and Zeus fall off of the pavilion and into a gaping wound in Gaia's chest. As such, when they land, Kratos and Zeus find themselves inside of Gaia, right next to her heart. But in spite of the dramatic change in their surroundings, their fight carries on. At the end, in one quick move, Kratos finishes off both Zeus and Gaia. He takes the blade of Olympus and drives it through Zeus and into Gaia's heart, effectively killing both of them. Or so he thinks, of course. While Gaia, at the very least, is well and truly dead, Zeus isn't going to go down that easily. When Kratos regains consciousness, he finds himself on a patch of broken earth, surrounded by the vortex of destruction and chaos that the world has turned into as a result of the titanomachy of this age. He retrieves the blade of Olympus, ignoring Zeus's corpse, and walks off. He doesn't get too far though. Zeus's body may be broken, but his spirit lives on in an astral form. Zeus's spirit attacks Kratos, grabbing hold of him and immediately draining him of the things that drive him more than anything else, his anger and his sheer willpower. The next and final stage of Kratos' climactic duel with Zeus is one that in many ways is quite reminiscent of his fight with Ares. Just as Ares did in the original God of War, Zeus tries to defeat Kratos by breaking his mind, by driving him into a mental state where he can no longer continue to fight. But Kratos, as we've learnt by now, is a stubborn man to say the least. God of War 3's final minutes take a trip into the psyche, where Kratos, with the help of a manifestation of Pandora who continues to live on inside of him, basically takes a trip down memory lane. He revisits all of the horrible things he's done, all of the things that have happened to him, and he ends up being able to do something that, if you really think about it, the entire series has been centered around. Kratos is a man who's been weighed down by an incredible amount of guilt and regret for a long, long time, but finally he finds it within him to forgive himself. He thwarts Zeus's attempts to drive him off the edge of sanity, and he comes out a stronger and more resolute man. He returns to his bodily self with a renewed vigor and determination inside of him and forces Zeus's astral form back into his body. And before his father can pull any more rabbits out of his hat, the ghost of Sparta finishes the job. In a brutal and incredibly satisfying scene shown through the eyes of Kratos himself, he literally beats Zeus to death, splattering the screen with layers upon layers of red. And so, Zeus finally dies, and Kratos' long-drawn and fateful quest for revenge finishes. As Kratos stands on the edge of the platform and looks on at the ruins of the world, Athena arrives, congratulating him on his job. And it is at this point that God of War 3 reveals what exactly happened with Pandora's box. When it was first made after the Great War, it was made to contain all of the evils of the war. Fear, anger, greed, gluttony, such were the things that the various Olympians put into the box before they sealed it, presumably forever. But while they were doing so, in secret, Athena placed a secret weapon of her own inside of it as well: hope. Back in his fight with Ares, when Kratos first opened Pandora's box, he unknowingly released all of those evils into the world. Hope, of course, was released alongside of them. Athena always assumed that hope was lost, while the evils went into Kratos, empowering him to defeat Ares and trounce all of the other gods, titans, and mortals he came across from then on. Whereas the truth was actually very different. It was with the power of hope that Kratos was able to defeat Ares, and that power had been resting inside of him ever since. And after he was able to forgive himself and reconcile with the tremendous mountain of guilt that had been weighing down on him for years, he was able to tap into its true powers to kill Zeus. When Kratos unwittingly released the evils within the box, they went not into the Spartan but into the gods of Olympus, and more importantly, into Zeus. The king of Olympus became obsessed with his fear of the prediction made by the Sisters of Fate, by the cycle of sons killing their fathers, and it was this fear that drove him to do the things that he did. That fear drove him to try and kill Kratos, to the destruction of Sparta, to the kidnapping of Pandora, and all of the other atrocious acts he committed. It is possible that while on her new plane of existence, Athena was able to figure all of this out, which was why she suddenly was willing to help Kratos in his quest to kill Zeus. That is, of course, an assumption, but that's all we have, so you can take it or leave it. Athena tells Kratos that now that he has destroyed Olympus and killed Zeus, he should hand over the power of hope to her. Mankind, she says, will not know what to do with it, and if Athena were to wield its power, she'd be able to shape the world much better than the Olympians ever did, or at least that's how she's trying to spin it. Kratos sees right through her, having dealt with the gods' lies and deceptions for his entire life, and sees it for what it truly is, an attempt on Athena's part to seize the opportunity of becoming an all-powerful element. Kratos knows that giving the power to Athena would be a mistake, and so he makes his decision on what to do with it. Kratos takes the blade of Olympus and he stabs himself with it, killing himself and releasing the power of hope into the world. Athena, understandably enough, is furious. She tells Kratos that she is disappointed in him and the choice that he's made, but Kratos goes out in the most Kratos way possible. He scoffs at her and tells her that he owed her nothing, and so he dies. Or so we think. Seriously, this isn't even surprising at this point. In a post-credits scene, the camera focuses on the very spot where Kratos died, except his corpse is nowhere to be found. Instead, the only thing that remains of it is a trail of blood, leading to the edge of the platform. And that is where God of War 3 ends, with the complete destruction of the Greek mythological pantheon. The next chapter in the series releases not long from now, and it seems like it's going to be vastly different from anything we've seen. The changes it's making in the way we will play God of War are obvious enough, but even from a narrative perspective, things are looking a lot different. For one, it's no longer set in Greece, which makes sense seeing as all of the Greek gods are dead. God of War is instead going to be set in Scandinavia, in the backdrop of Norse mythology. What's more, Kratos has a son now, and he's a far older, calmer, more reflective person than he's ever been in the entire series. Things are certainly looking intriguing, to say the least, but there are so many questions that the game is going to have to answer. How did Kratos manage to make it out of God of War 3 alive? Will the Blades of Chaos make another appearance? How did the world recover from the absolute destruction Kratos' actions resulted in? We're hoping God of War will be able to answer these questions, among others, to our satisfaction. And we also hope that through this series we are able to help you refresh your memories on everything that's happened until now. And that brings an end to this series. If there's anything you feel that we may have missed, or if you have suggestions about which series or game we should look into in our next Story So Far features, sound off in the comment section below. Meanwhile, we're also currently doing story recaps for The Legend of Zelda, so be sure to check those out as well. And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.